Hello and welcome. My name is Amanda, and today I have for you my top 10 books that I read in 2018. So this is just going to be a list of the books that I rated the highest throughout the year. So for this, I'm going to go over my 4-star ratings as well as my 5-star ratings. I did rate 28 books or 27 books as a 4-star, and I believe only 3 books as a 5-star. So just to narrow it down a little, I'm gonna say my top 7 4-star reads and my 3 5-star reads. And then down in the description box below, I will put a list of all the books that I rated 4 stars. So the first book I want to talk about is The Alice Network by Kate Quinn. This was, I believe, the second book I read in 2018. It is a novel that spans both World War I and World War II, and we follow 2 characters' points of views. So the chapters alternate between them, and one of them we follow from her time in World War I as a spy among the Alice Network, which was a network comprised of all women, because during World War I, it wasn't very common for women to be spies, so it wasn't really seen as a threat or as something that anyone should pay attention to. And then we also follow the end of World War II. There's a girl who's looking for her cousin who she lost contact with, and this woman is kind of helping her to find her cousin. I love this book so much. I thought it was a really good representation of that time period. And it was just really interesting because I haven't read a lot of books from that take place during World War I. So it was nice to have that balance of something familiar with my knowledge and background of World War II and what happened during that, and then pulling in the First Great War. So that is the first book that I rated, well, technically the second book I rated 4 stars, but the first that we're talking about. Another book that I rated 4 stars was A Man Called Eva by Frederick Backman. This is a book that I also listened to on audiobook. If I didn't say before, I listened to the Alice Network on audiobook. Most of my books this year were listened to on audio versus read physically or as an ebook. So A Man Called Eva was a book I picked to read because there was a magical readathon prompt for it that was Transfiguration, and it was either a book about like shape-shifting or a book that had a cat on the cover, because one of our favorite professors of Transfiguration, McGonagall, can turn into a cat, obviously. So I went the route of looking for a book with a cat on the cover, and A Man Called Eva has one. And this is a book that really shocked me. I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did, because it follows a man who is in his, I can't remember if he's late 50s, early 60s, or if he's older than that. But he's just this grumpy old man who gets forced into the shenanigans of his new neighbors next door, and having to help them out and deal with his like past prejudices and learning to love them and just, you know, be more open to what's out there in the world after the passing of his wife. So that was a really good book that I enjoyed quite a bit. And the next book is The Martian by Andy Weir. This book I was expecting to like. I've heard a lot of reviews that it's just a really funny read, and I agree. I thought it was really funny. It was very entertaining for a sci-fi, which could potentially be really scary, but it kind of turned a really serious situation into something more lighthearted that a lot of people could kind of connect with. Our narrator, Mark Watney, who's the person of the book who gets left on Mars, he's a botanist, and what else is he, a mechanic or something like that? I don't remember. When you're an astronaut, you have 2 professions or 2 things you have degrees in. His first one was botany, and I know he was really good with mechanical stuff, at least. So that was a fun read. I listened to that on audiobook, and it makes me interested in picking up more of Andy Weir's books. So I'm looking forward to that for 2019. So then another book that I listened to, I actually got the hardcover though or a hard copy from my friend because she was moving. But I think I listened to this one from my library, I want to say, but that is The Art of Racing in the Rain by Garth Stein. This follows a dog named Enzo, kind of from when he gets adopted by his human, I don't remember what his human's name is. Denny. So when he gets adopted by his human, into Denny getting married, starting a family, his wife becoming terminally ill, and those sorts of things that just kind of happen in every family. So this takes place in and around Seattle, which is where I've grown up, and so it was really great to read this book from a dog's perspective, but also set in a place that I know really well. I laughed and cried during this book. It made me really angry in some parts when Enzo was being neglected, and when I finished it, basically Skylar had to pick me up off the ground because I was crying so hard about not wanting to lose our dog. So this one had a very, very deep emotional impact on me just because of the dog and then the setting as well. So I really enjoyed this. I have read another book by Garth Stein, and I don't know how many other books he has out, but he is another author that I would like to read more of, especially since so far the 2 books I've read of his have been set in Washington. So very close to home, and I like to read in a setting that I know quite a lot. I'm going to apologize now because my camera is moving around because the dogs are being complete animals. Yes, that dog that I cried over is being a monster. So the next book that I gave a 4-star rating was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is another book that I listened to on audiobook. Another sci-fi book too that I really enjoyed. I've never seen Black Mirror, but I've heard a lot of people compare it to Black Mirror, and Skylar watched a couple episodes and told me about them, and from what he was describing to me, I can see why people link Dark Matter and Black Mirror together. But this was a really interesting take on the sci-fi parallel world, how every decision you make branches off, and then what your life would be like if you had made that decision and then the decisions to follow. So it was really interesting to read about all the doppelgangers and just figure out what was even going on and who the real person was that was supposed to be in that world. So that was another book that I really enjoyed. And then getting back onto the physical books that I read, I also rated Animal Farm by George Orwell a 4-star. This is a book that I think I read it for a prompt because it was banned. And it wasn't ever a book that I was really interested in reading. I know some people had to read it in high school, but it was never one of the books that my classes had to read. So I never picked it up. But I really enjoyed 1985 by George Orwell. And so I guess I was and wasn't surprised that I really liked Animal Farm. It just was an interesting take on the events at the time and telling them from animals' points of views. And I don't know, it was just a good book, not a super dry, boring classic like they can be sometimes, and that's coming from a person who does enjoy classics. But yeah, I thought I would give Animal Farm a mention. And then the last 4-star book that I want to talk about is The Mountain Between Us by Charles Martin. This book I thought, well, I started reading it when I was flying from Dallas to Austin, which was probably not a good time to start reading a book about a plane crash. But I was just really engrossed in the story, and there was even a point where I was participating in a readathon and I had to stop listening to the audiobook format for a little bit. But when I picked it up, it was really easy to get back into. It was interesting to kind of have that backcountry hiking knowledge in one of the characters, and I mean, it was really convenient for the story, and him also being a doctor, being with a passenger who broke her leg. But I thought the story was really interesting. I thought their relationship and dynamic worked really well, and how they grew to depend on each other and just put a lot of trust and faith in each other. And then there was a big reveal at the end that I didn't see coming, but I thought it was done pretty well, and I did really enjoy that book. I am interested in watching the movie because it has Kate Winslet in it, and I really enjoy her as an actress, so I think I might have to pick that up soon. So those are the 7 4-star books that I wanted to talk about, and then going into the 3 5-star books I have. The first one is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This is another book that I read at the beginning of the year, and it is a middle grade book, and it's got beautiful illustrations in it. It's a really quick read, but it's also a pretty hard-hitting read. This also deals with a young kid whose mother has cancer, and just kind of him going through the process of grief and coming to terms with it, and kind of just understanding what that is going to mean for his future if he loses his mom. So there's a monster that comes visiting and kind of gives him a lesson on you know, the whole story. So it was a really good book, also pretty hard-hitting, and apparently this one's a movie also, so maybe that's one that we will have to add to our list. The next 5-star book I want to talk about is Wild Beauty by Anna Marie McLemore. This was 100% a cover buy for me. When I saw the Alcray unboxing for this, which has like a parchment-y color in the middle here, I knew I wanted to pick up this book, just, I mean, if nothing else, to have it on my shelf, and I'm really glad that I liked it. So this is a young adult magical realism book. It follows 5 girls, I believe it's 5 girls, who are all cousins, and just this land that they live on, and how they have kind of powers to grow different flowers and just make the land beautiful. But they start to learn more about the land, and it's not exactly what they thought it was. And things are unearthed and revealed, and I thought it was done in a really beautiful and just lyrical way. Anna Marie McLemore has a really great writing style that I appreciate a lot. And I can't wait to read more from her. I did pick up her 2 backlisted books, When the Moon Was Ours and The Weight of Feathers, and I read those this year as well. And then I also have Blanca and Roja, which came out this year, that I plan to read in the spring of next year. So she's kind of an auto-buy author for me now, but I did really enjoy this book. And the last book I want to talk about is one that, excuse me, one I talked about quite a bit after I read it, and it is Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. And this is a novel. It's a World War II novel or biography, that is written about the life of Louis Zamperini. He was kind of a troubled kid in his younger years. He got into just a lot of mischief and mayhem, and then he started running track and ended up training to run in the 1966 Olympics. I used to know the dates. Some 36 Olympics. It had to have been 36 Olympics in Berlin. And then shortly after, he was supposed to compete in the Olympics again, but that's when war started, and Pearl Harbor was bombed, and he ended up enlisting in the Army Air Force, the Army Air What's it called in the Army?
I don't know, but at that time, I don't think the Air Force has branched off yet.
Army Air
Airmen?
something. Airmen. Yeah, Airmen.
By the way,
What?
George Orwell wrote 1984, not 1985.
Did I say 1985?
Yeah.
It happens. So Louis enlisted in the Army as a bombardier. And at one point, his crew go out looking for a plane that they believe went down. And his plane ends up malfunctioning and going down in somewhere in the, I believe it's the South Pacific. And only he and two other of his crewmates survive. And they end up having to survive on rafts for a number of days. And when they finally wash ashore, it's onto an island that's occupied by Japan, so they become prisoners of war. And it's just his story of his experiences in the prisoner of war camp and how he was treated or mistreated, and just the after effects of being a prisoner of war and what PTSD was like, and just kind of how he overcame that. It was a really interesting story. It was very motivational at points. It was maddening in others, and it's a story that stayed with me for quite a while now. So that was probably, I would say, my top read of the year. But that is it for my top 10 best books that I read this year, with both 4-star and 5-star ratings. I would love to know what the best books you've read this year were, so if you feel so inclined, please leave those down in the comments below, and I will chat with you there until my next video. Bye!